What the hell are you doing in my bed? James Morrison's voice cut through the silence like a blade. He stood frozen in his bedroom doorway, suit wrinkled from the flight, briefcase slipping from his hand. Martha Davies, his maid, lay in his king-sized bed, and surrounding her, sleeping peacefully for the first time in 6 months, were his 3 sons. Her eyes opened slowly. No panic, no guilt. "Mr. Morrison," she said softly, "I can explain." But James wasn't listening. His face flushed red. "You're fired," he said. "Get out of my house, now." Martha didn't argue. She moved carefully, sliding out from between the boys without waking them. She smoothed David's blonde hair back, tucked the blanket around Desmond, whispered something to Daniel that James couldn't hear. Then she walked past him, shoes in hand, head high. Downstairs, Mrs. Chen stood in the hallway. Her eyes widened when she saw Martha's face, calm but broken. "Miss Davies, it's all right, Mrs. Chen," Martha said quietly. "Goodbye." The door closed behind her. The gate creaked shut, and Martha Davies stepped out into the cool Boston night, alone. Upstairs, James stood in his bedroom, breathing hard. The boys didn't stir. He moved closer, staring at their faces in the dim light. Desmond's mouth was relaxed. David's breathing was steady. Daniel's fists were open. They were asleep. Actually asleep. 23 nannies, therapists, doctors, sleep specialists. And this woman, this quiet woman who mopped his floors, had done what none of them could. On the nightstand, he saw a folded piece of paper. He opened it. "They asked me not to leave them alone in the dark. Sometimes that's all a child needs, someone who doesn't leave." James sank onto the edge of the bed, the note trembling in his hands. Shame flooded through him like ice water. He'd seen a black woman in his bed with his white children, and his mind went exactly where it had been trained to go. He didn't ask questions. He didn't wait for the truth. He just fired her. And now she was gone. Before we begin, like this video, subscribe, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. Because this isn't just a story, it's a reminder that sometimes God sends help in ways we don't expect, through people we overlook. And maybe, just maybe, you needed to hear this today. James didn't sleep. He sat in his study until the sky turned gray, the note resting on his desk, beside an untouched glass of bourbon. Outside, the first light touched the rooftops of Brookline. Inside, the house felt hollow. Not the suffocating kind of hollow he'd lived with since Catherine died. This was different, like something good had been there, and now it was gone. He kept replaying it, the way Martha had looked at him, not angry, not defensive, just tired, like she'd seen this coming, like she'd been dismissed before, and the boys. God, the boys, sleeping like they used to when Catherine was alive, peaceful, safe. He'd destroyed that in 5 seconds. At 6:30, the screaming started. James bolted upstairs, heart pounding. Daniel was thrashing in his sheets, eyes wild. David sat in the corner, rocking back and forth, hands clamped over his ears. Desmond stood by the window, tears streaming down his face, silent. "Where's Martha?" Daniel's voice cracked. "Where is she?" "I want Martha," David wailed. James knelt down, reaching for them. "Boys, it's okay. I'm here." Daniel shoved him away, hard. "You made her leave." His face twisted with anger and grief. "You always make them leave." The words hit like a fist to the chest. James tried again. "Daniel, listen." "No." The boy was sobbing now. "She didn't do anything wrong. She helped us, and you yelled at her." David buried his face in his knees, rocking harder. Desmond just stared, those 6-year-old eyes seeing straight through him. Mrs. Chen appeared in the doorway. She took one look at the chaos, and her jaw tightened. "Boys," she said firmly, "downstairs, breakfast, now." They obeyed her instantly, filed past their father without a glance. When their footsteps faded, Mrs. Chen turned to James. Her voice was quiet, controlled, but there was steel underneath. "You fired her. She was in my bed with 3 terrified children who finally trusted someone enough to sleep." Mrs. Chen crossed her arms. "Do you even know what happened last night?" James opened his mouth, closed it. The nanny quit. Number 24. The boys locked themselves in your room and were screaming so loud I thought someone would call the police. She paused, letting that sink in. David couldn't breathe. I was about to dial 911. James felt his stomach drop. Martha was upstairs cleaning. She heard them and knocked on the door. Talked to them. 20 minutes, Mr. Morrison. That's how long it took her to calm them down enough to let her in. And when they did, they begged her not to leave. I didn't know. There's more. Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone, showed him a photo. Martha crouched beside David in the kitchen, bandaging his knee. Another of her reading to the boys in the library. She's been helping them. For weeks. Quietly. She swiped to another image. Last Tuesday, David was choking on a grape. Martha saved his life. Heimlich maneuver. She told me not to tell you because you had enough to worry about. James felt the room tilt. Who is she? He whispered. Mrs. Chen's voice softened. A pediatric nurse from Chicago. 5 years at Lurie Children's Hospital. She lost her daughter, 4 years old, allergic reaction, and walked away from medicine. She's been cleaning houses ever since. The phone slipped from James's hand. Where did she go? Mrs. Chen shook her head. I don't know, but you better find her fast. James found her 2 days later. Not at her apartment. Mrs. Chen didn't have that address. Not at an employment agency or a church. He found her at a women's shelter in Dorchester, serving lunch to homeless mothers and their children. He stood in the doorway of the community room, feeling every inch of how out of place he was. Designer suit, Rolex, polished shoes on scuffed linoleum. Martha looked up from ladling soup into a bowl. Her eyes widened, then hardened. Mr. Morrison, her voice was flat. You shouldn't be here. I need to talk to you. I'm working. Martha, please. It's Miss Davies. She set down the ladle, wiped her hands on her apron. And I don't have anything to say to you. She turned and walked toward the kitchen. He followed. Inside, 2 volunteers glanced up, sensing the tension. I was wrong, James said quickly. About everything. The boys. They won't stop asking for you. Martha kept her back to him. She started washing dishes, movements precise, controlled. That's not my problem anymore, she said quietly. You fired me. I crossed a line. Isn't that what you said? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. She turned, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't seen before. Pain. Old pain. I've been of the help my whole life, Mr. Morrison. I know how this works. I stay in my place, I clean your floors, and the second I care too much, the second I step outside the box you put me in, I become a threat. That's not fair. A black woman in your bed with your white children? She said it softly, without anger, just truth. We both know what you thought, what you assumed, and we both know if I looked like your wife, you never would have reacted that way. The words landed like stones in his chest, because she was right. James's voice dropped. You're right. I saw you there, and I didn't see you. I saw something I was taught to fear, and I'm sorry. Deeply sorry. Martha studied him for a long moment, then shook her head. Sorry doesn't undo it. I know, he took a breath. Mrs. Chen told me about David, about the choking, about everything you've been doing for them. I did my job. No. James stepped closer. You did what I should have been doing. You saw my sons as children, not problems. You stayed when it was hard. His voice cracked. You gave them something I couldn't. Martha set down the dish towel. And what's that? Hope, he said, that someone would stay. The kitchen fell quiet. One of the volunteers slipped out, giving them space. The boys need you, James continued. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm asking you to come back, not as a maid, as, he hesitated, as family. The word hung between them. Martha looked away. You don't even know me. Then let me, James said. Please. Outside, a church bell rang in the distance. Martha closed her eyes, and for just a moment, she looked like she was praying. Martha came back 3 days later, not through the service entrance, through the front door. James met her there with the boys. The second they saw her, they ran, all three of them shouting her name like a prayer. "Martha! Martha!" She dropped to her knees and let them crash into her. Daniel wrapped his arms around her neck. David pressed his face into her shoulder. Desmond grabbed her hand and wouldn't let go. "I missed you," Daniel whispered, voice muffled against her. "I missed you too, sweetheart." James watched from the doorway, throat tight. He'd forgotten what their laughter sounded like. When the boys finally let her breathe, Martha stood and faced him. Her expression was calm, professional. "We need to talk," she said, privately. In his study, she sat across from him, not like an employee, like an equal. She pulled out a folded piece of paper from her bag. "These are my terms," James nodded. "Okay." She unfolded it, read aloud. 1. I'm not your maid. I'm here for the boys. My title is Child Care Specialist. 2. I make decisions about their health, their schedules, their therapy. 3. You go to counseling with me and the boys, once a week, non-negotiable. James didn't interrupt. 4. My salary is $75,000 a year, plus benefits. 5. She looked up, eyes steady. If you ever raise your voice at me like that again, I'm gone. No second chances. James felt the weight of that last one settle in his chest. Agreed, he said quietly. All of it. Martha leaned forward slightly. And one more thing. You have to be present, not just physically, emotionally. Those boys don't need someone who pays the bills and hides in his office. They need a father. James's voice came out rough. I don't know if I remember how to be that. Then we'll figure it out together. She extended her hand. He shook it. Over the next few weeks, the house changed. Martha woke the boys gently each morning. Breakfast became something they did together. No phones, no emails, just talking. She taught them how to name what they were feeling. Scared, sad, angry. It's okay to feel those things. James started coming home earlier. He sat with them at dinner, read to them before bed, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. One night, David showed Martha a drawing, 4 stick figures holding hands, underneath, in crooked letters, our family. Martha's eyes filled with tears. That's beautiful, baby. Desmond looked up from his coloring book. Are you going to stay forever? Martha smoothed his hair. I'm going to stay as long as you need me. But late that night, after the boys were asleep, Martha sat alone in her room. On her nightstand was a photo of a little girl with braids and a bright smile. Her daughter, Lily. I hope I'm doing right by them, she whispered. I hope you'd be proud. Downstairs, an envelope slid through the mail slot. No stamp. Hand-delivered. James found it the next morning. His hands shook as he opened it. Emergency petition for custody. Whitmore Fee Morrison. His blood went cold. James didn't call Martha into his study right away. He sat there alone for 20 minutes, rereading the petition. Every word felt like a punch. Negligent parenting following the tragic death of Catherine Morrison. 24 nannies in 6 months, demonstrating instability and lack of proper care. Inappropriate relationship with unqualified domestic worker Martha Davies, who has a documented history of child death under her supervision. That last line made him physically sick. They'd twisted her tragedy, turned her daughter's death into a weapon. He heard footsteps in the hallway, Martha's voice, soft and patient. No, Desmond, you have to brush all your teeth, not just the front ones. A small laugh, the sound of water running. James closed his eyes. When he finally called her in, she knew immediately something was wrong. What is it? He slid the petition across the desk. Martha read in silence. Her face didn't change. That calm mask she used to wear when she was just the maid, it slipped back into place. They're going to use me against you, she said quietly. They're lying. They're weaponizing the truth. She set the papers down carefully. A black woman with no credentials who lost her own child. A millionaire who fired her for being in his bed with his sons. then mysteriously hired her back at triple the salary. She looked up. What do you think that looks like to a judge? I don't care how it looks. You should. Her voice sharpened. Because family court judges care. And Richard and Catherine Whitmore have money, James. Connections. Power. And they're white. The words sat heavy between them. James stood. What are you saying? Martha walked to the window, arms crossed. I'm saying maybe I should leave. Let you fight this without me making it worse. No. He moved toward her. Absolutely not. James, they're not taking my boys, and you're not leaving. He stood beside her. We fight this. Together. Martha wanted to believe him, but she'd seen this story before. The black woman blamed. Erased. They're going to paint me as dangerous, she said softly. Someone who took advantage, who crossed boundaries. Let them try. James's jaw tightened. Because I'll tell them the truth, that you saved my children, that you saved me. Martha turned to look at him, really look at him, and for the first time, she saw something she hadn't expected. Fear. He was just as scared as she was. They're going to ask about Lily, she whispered. I know. They're going to make me relive it, in front of strangers. James reached out slowly, carefully, and took her hand. You don't have to do this alone. Her eyes filled with tears. I've been alone for 5 years. Not anymore. That night, Martha sat on the floor of her room, Lily's photo in her hands. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this baby, she whispered. But those boys need me. And maybe God sent me here for a reason. Downstairs, James knelt beside his bed for the second time in months. Please, don't let me lose them. Not again. The hearing was set for 3 weeks out. James hired the best family lawyer in Boston, Robert Chen, a man who'd built his career on impossible cases. But even Robert looked concerned after reading the Whitmore's petition. They're playing dirty, he said during their first meeting. This isn't just about custody. They're trying to destroy your character, and hers. Martha sat beside James in the conference room, hands folded in her lap. Robert looked at her directly. Miss Davies, they're going to ask about your daughter, about the day she died, about why you gave up nursing. Are you prepared for that? Martha's voice was steady. No, but I'll do it anyway. James watched her. The strength it took for her to sit there, knowing what was coming. It humbled him. That night, after the boys were asleep, James found Martha on the back porch. She was staring out at the Boston skyline, arms wrapped around herself. He didn't say anything, just sat down beside her. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Martha spoke. Her name was Lily. She was 4. Her voice was soft, distant. We were at a park. She got stung by a bee. I didn't know she was allergic. By the time the ambulance came, she stopped, swallowed hard. I'm a nurse. I should have known. I should have saved her. It wasn't your fault, James said quietly. Doesn't matter. I couldn't forgive myself. She looked down at her hands. I walked away from everything. My license, my career, my sister. I just disappeared. James turned to face her. And now you're here. Now I'm here, she repeated, taking care of someone else's children while mine is gone. Martha, do you know what they're going to say? She looked at him, eyes wet. That I'm trying to replace her, that I attached myself to your family because I lost my own, that I'm broken, dangerous. You're not broken. Yes, I am. A tear slipped down her cheek. We all are. You, me, those boys upstairs, we're all just broken people trying to hold each other together. James felt something crack open in his chest. Then maybe that's enough. Martha looked at him confused. Maybe being broken is what makes us right for each other, he said. Maybe that's what family really is, not perfect people. Just people who refuse to leave. Martha closed her eyes. More tears fell. I'm scared, she whispered. Me too. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for the first time since Catherine died, James didn't feel alone. Inside, Daniel stood at his bedroom window, watching them. He smiled. Then he went back to bed. 2 weeks later, they walked into Suffolk County Family Court together. The Whitmores were already there. Richard Whitmore looked at Martha like she was dirt on his shoe. Catherine wouldn't look at her at all. James took Martha's hand. "We're in this together," he said. She squeezed back. "Together." The courtroom was smaller than James expected. Colder. The Whitmores sat with their legal team, 4 lawyers in expensive suits. James had Robert and Martha sitting behind them in a simple navy dress, hands folded. The Whitmores' lead attorney was a man named Thornton. Silver hair, sharp eyes. The kind of man who knew exactly how to twist truth into something ugly. He started with James, painted him as an absent father who'd failed his children, who'd hired 24 nannies in 6 months, who'd abandoned them to staff while he buried himself in work. Every word stung because some of it was true. Then he called Martha to the stand. She walked up slowly, chin high, sat down, placed her hands in her lap. Robert started gently. "Miss Davies, can you tell the court what happened on the night of October 15th? Martha's voice was calm, clear. The boys' nanny had quit. They locked themselves in Mr. Morrison's bedroom. They were having a trauma response, hyperventilation, dissociation, fear. I have 5 years of pediatric nursing experience. I recognized what was happening. So I intervened." "And why were you in the bed with them?" "Because they asked me to stay. Because the most important thing you can do for a traumatized child is prove you won't leave them alone in the dark." Thornton stood for cross-examination. He smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Davies, you're not a licensed nurse anymore, are you?" "No." "Because your daughter died under your care, correct?" The courtroom went still. Martha's hands tightened slightly. "My license wasn't revoked. I chose to surrender it." "Your 4-year-old daughter died of anaphylaxis from a bee sting while you were watching her." Thornton's voice was sharp. "Is that correct?" Robert shot to his feet. "Objection! This is inflammatory." But Martha spoke over him. Her voice didn't waver. "Yes, my daughter died. It was ruled an accident by the medical board and the police. It was a tragedy, not negligence." She looked directly at Thornton. "And yes, I carry that guilt every single day. But that guilt taught me something. It taught me that children are precious, that every moment matters, that you don't walk away when they need you. Or maybe," Thornton leaned forward, "you failed to protect your own child, and now Mr. Morrison expects us to believe you can protect his?" Martha's breath caught, just for a second. James saw it, the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes went distant, and he couldn't take it anymore. "That's enough," James said, standing. The judge looked at him sharply. "Mr. Morrison, sit down." But James didn't sit. He looked at Martha, at the way she was holding herself together by a thread. "She saved my sons," he said, "and you're tearing her apart for it." Robert pulled him back down, whispering urgently. The judge called a recess. Outside in the hallway, Martha leaned against the wall, eyes closed, breathing carefully. James stood beside her. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." She didn't open her eyes. "They're going to win, aren't they?" "No," James said. "They're not." But he wasn't sure he believed it. When court resumed, the judge did something unexpected. She asked to see the boys, not on the witness stand, in her chambers, private. Robert, Thornton, James, and the Whitmores were allowed inside. Martha had to wait outside. Judge Harris was an older black woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense voice. She knelt down to the boy's level. "Daniel," she said gently, "can you tell me about Martha?" Daniel looked at his father, then at his grandparents, then back at the judge. "She makes us feel safe," he said quietly. "How does she do that?" "She doesn't leave. Everyone else left, but she stays." David spoke up, his voice small. "She doesn't get mad when we cry. She says it's okay to miss Mommy." Desmond, the quietest one, said simply, "She loves us." Judge Harris made notes. "And what about your dad?" The boys looked at James. "He's trying," Daniel said. "Martha's teaching him." After the boys left, Judge Harris leaned back in her chair, studying everyone. 2 days later, she delivered her ruling. The courtroom was packed. Press had gotten wind of the case. Cameras waited outside. Judge Harris spoke clearly. This court recognizes that the Morrison children have experienced significant trauma. The court also recognizes that Mr. Morrison's initial response to that trauma was inadequate. James's stomach dropped. However, the judge continued, the evidence shows marked improvement in the children's well-being since Miss Davies entered their care. The petition for emergency guardianship is denied. Martha exhaled. James grabbed her hand. But, Judge Harris wasn't finished, this court orders the following: mandatory family therapy, monthly home visits by a social worker for 6 months, and Miss Davies must complete a trauma-informed child care certification within 1 year. Outside, Richard Whitmore made a statement to the press. "It's a disgrace," he said, voice bitter. "Leaving children with a domestic worker who has a child's death on her record. We'll be appealing." The story exploded. Headlines everywhere. Conservative outlets calling it dangerous, progressive ones calling out the racism, comment sections filled with venom. Martha sat in the living room that night, scrolling through her phone, face blank. James found her there. "Don't read that." "Why not?" Her voice was hollow. "It's all true. I'm the black maid who overstepped. That's the story they want." "It's not the truth." "The truth doesn't matter anymore." James sat beside her. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then he made a decision. The next morning, James Morrison stood outside his architecture firm. Martha stood beside him. The boys held her hands. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. James stepped up to the microphone. 6 months ago, my wife died. I fell apart. I hired people to manage what I couldn't face. My children's grief, my own failure. I went through 23 nannies before Martha Davies walked into our lives. He paused. And when she finally did what all those credentialed professionals couldn't, when she helped my sons sleep without nightmares, I fired her. The crowd went silent. Why? Because I saw a black woman in my bed with my white children, and I assumed the worst. His voice cracked. I didn't see her compassion, her skill, her heart. I saw a threat, because that's what I was taught to see. He looked at Martha. I was wrong, shamefully wrong. Martha didn't cross a line that night. She erased one. Because children don't care about credentials or skin color. They care about who stays when they're scared. And Martha stayed. Daniel suddenly spoke up. Martha is family. David and Desmond nodded. The press conference ended, but the conversation had just begun. That night, messages poured in. Support from families like theirs, from caregivers of color, from people who'd been misjudged. Martha read them, and finally, she cried. Not from pain, from hope. 3 months passed. Martha enrolled in a trauma-informed care certification program at Harvard Extension School. Twice a week she drove to Cambridge, studied late at night after the boys slept, rediscovered parts of herself she thought were buried. One evening, her instructor asked her to stay after class. Davies, the woman said. That's your last name? Martha stiffened. Yes, Martha Davies. From Chicago, Lurie Children's Hospital. Martha's heart stopped. The woman's face. It was familiar. Nicole? Her sister smiled, tears already forming. Hey, sis. They hadn't spoken in 5 years, not since Lily's funeral, when Martha pushed everyone away. Nicole moved around the desk and pulled Martha into a hug. Martha resisted at first, then broke. I'm sorry, Martha whispered. I'm so sorry. I know, Nicole said. I know. They talked for hours that night, about Lily, about grief, about the boys, about everything Martha had been carrying alone. Your license, Nicole said finally. I've been working with the Illinois Nursing Board. With your certification and my recommendation, they'll reinstate it. You can practice again. Martha shook her head. I can't. You already are. You're just calling it something else. 3 months later, Martha stood in a small ceremony at Boston Children's Hospital. Dr. Reyes, the chief of pediatrics, handed her a badge. Martha Davies, RN, pediatric trauma specialist. The boys were there, holding a sign they'd made. "Our Martha is a real nurse." James stood beside them, eyes bright. That night, James asked Martha to his study. "I have something for you." He slid a document across the desk. Martha read the header. Her hands started shaking. Legal co-guardianship agreement. "James, I want you to be their guardian, officially." His voice was gentle, "not as an employee, as family. If something happens to me, they stay with you. And even if nothing happens, you have legal authority to make decisions about their lives, because you already do. I just want the law to recognize it." Martha couldn't speak. "Why?" she finally whispered. "Because you didn't just save them." James's eyes were steady. "You saved me. You taught me how to be a father again, how to stay when things are hard. I trust you with everything that matters to me, Martha." She stared at the papers. "And what are we? What is this?" James smiled softly. "Family. Maybe not the kind people expect, but family. Not," she couldn't finish. "Romance?" He shook his head gently. "Maybe someday. Or maybe never. What matters is we're partners. In this, in them." Martha picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the signature line. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." She signed. That weekend, they sat the boys down and explained it. "So Martha is like our mom now?" Daniel asked. Martha knelt. "I'll never replace your mom, but I love you like you're my own. Always will." Desmond wrapped his arms around her. "Good. Because we love you too." David grinned. "Can we call you Martha, Mom?" James and Martha looked at each other. "If you want," Martha said, voice breaking. And just like that, everything changed. 1 year later. The Morrison house on a Saturday morning was chaos, the good kind. Daniel practiced piano in the living room, badly, but with joy. David built a fort out of couch cushions. Desmond sat on the porch with Martha, reading quietly, her hand resting on his shoulder. James came home early from work, something he did now, and the boys shouted his name. "Dad! Dad! Watch this!" Not father, just Dad, and it sounded like home. At dinner that night, spilled milk, arguments about vegetables, laughter. Martha made an announcement. "Boston Children's Hospital asked me to develop a training program, teaching nurses how to work with children who've been through trauma. They're calling it the Davies Method." The boys cheered. James reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That's incredible." "And," Martha continued, "they want to partner with your firm to design spaces for healing, hospitals, shelters, places where kids feel safe." James blinked. "They asked for me? I recommended you." Their eyes met. Something warm passed between them. Not quite love, not yet, but something close, something growing. The next week, Martha asked James if they could take a trip. "Where?" he asked. "Chicago. I need to visit Lily's grave." She paused. "And I want to bring the boys." James didn't hesitate. "Of course." They drove together, all 5 of them. The boys were quiet in the back seat, sensing this mattered. At Graceland Cemetery, Martha knelt before a small headstone. Lily Marie Davies, 2018 to 2022. Forever loved. The boys stood close beside her. "Lily," Martha said softly, "these are Daniel, David, and Desmond. They wanted to meet you." Daniel placed a wildflower on the grave. "Hi, Lily. We love your mom. She takes really good care of us." David added, "She's the best at hugs." Desmond whispered, "We'll take care of her too, we promise." Martha closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. James stood back, giving them space, but close enough to be present. On the drive home, Desmond fell asleep against Martha's shoulder. Daniel and David argued about superheroes. James glanced at Martha in the rearview mirror. She smiled. He smiled back. That night, after the boys were tucked in, James and Martha sat on the back porch under the stars. The Boston skyline glowed in the distance. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't walked into that bedroom?" Martha asked. James shook his head. I try not to. It's too painful. I think about it sometimes, she said. And I think maybe we were meant to find each other, all of us, not despite the brokenness, because of it. Kintsugi, James said quietly. What? Japanese art, repairing broken pottery with gold. The cracks become beautiful. Martha smiled. I like that. Inside, 3 boys slept peacefully, dreaming of tomorrow. Outside, 2 broken people who'd chosen to stay sat in comfortable silence, and somewhere beyond the stars, maybe Lily and Catherine were smiling too. Because healing doesn't happen in grand moments. It happens in the staying, in the small choices to love when it's hard, in the quiet belief that broken things and broken people can become something beautiful, not perfect, but whole.